At the end of the day, I want to be a Milwaukee Buck for the rest of my career, as long as we are winning. That's a direct quote of what Giannis said to the New York Times in a past article covering the Bucks acquiring Dame. Back then, it felt like a promise. He was a Finals MVP, he had a title with a small market, and the "I don't need a super team" speeches. Giannis was supposed to be the guy who beat the system and stayed loyal doing it. But now we fast forward a few years, and that little condition at the end, as long as we are winning, is starting to feel less like a throwaway and more like a warning. The Bucks got older, got more expensive, they've cycled through coaches, they traded away pieces of their championship core, and now they're losing games that no team should ever lose, let alone a team that has Giannis on it. Milwaukee was supposed to be the franchise that saved Giannis, and now it's the franchise that's pushing him out the door. So let's take a rewind and look to see how we got to this point. Before we talk trades, contracts, and front office nonsense, you have to remember one thing. For Giannis, Milwaukee was never just where he worked or the team that he played. It was the place that pulled his family out of the survival mode that they lived in. That's why for years, all the Giannis is leaving talk always seemed kind of ridiculous. From the outside, it was again simple engagement or meme material. From his side, Milwaukee was quite literally a haven. It's a huge part of who he is. It's part of what his biopic is about. This is a guy who grew up selling stuff to tourists in Greece so that his family could eat, while his parents were bouncing around trying to avoid immigration trouble. He even says so himself. Now for this clip, I tried my best to fix the audio, but the source clip just isn't great, so bear with me.
I was walking down the street with a guy, and he was selling watches. I used to sell watches too. And I told him, he said, "You want a Rolex? I said, "Is it real?" He told me, "Come on, Giannis, you did my job. You know, this yesterday. He said, "You did my job. You know if it's real. It's fake." You know? He say, "But it's almost like real." You know, when I see people that I can help, because I know what they feel. You know, I know how hard it is to stay in the sun for 8 hours and try to sell one or two stuff so you can eat that day.
Basketball wasn't a brand or a legacy play back then. It was, if this works, my family's life changes. While it's a movie, again, they even make that a key point in the trailer for his biopic.
If we're good, we can help mom and dad. When one person in the family scores, the whole family scores.
This is the moment that his family gets stability, the moment his entire life changes. And that matters for this story, because it built the way that Giannis thinks. It separates him from a lot of stars who bounce the second that things get uncomfortable, or use their numbers to leverage and hold a franchise hostage. I just wanted to set that reminder now. We're not talking about someone like James Harden who pops bottles at a strip club and shows up out of shape on the bench until he forces himself to get traded. We're talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo. This is the same dude who sits down after a brutal playoff loss and gives you quotes like this.
It's a wrong question. There's no failure in sports. You know, there's good days, bad days. Some days you are able to be successful, some days you're not. Some days it's your turn, some days it's not your turn. And that's what sports is about. You don't always win. When you focus on the past, that's your ego. I did this. You know, we were able to, beat this team 4-0. I did this in the past. I won that in the past. And when I focus in the future, it's my pride. Like, yeah, next game 5, I do this and this and this. Right. You know, I'm going dominant. That's your pride talking. Like, it doesn't happen. Like, you're right here. And I kind of like try to focus in the, in the moment, in the present. And that's humility. That's being humble. That's not setting no expectation.
Even in his younger years, he was happy just to have 5 minutes in his younger basketball club.
I play over 25 minutes. It's good, it's okay.
He was happy just being in the NBA because that was the peak of his goals before we even mentioned championships. The guy who, even knowing that someone else is selling fake watches, he still buys from them because, in his own words, that's where he had been before. That's who the Bucks have.
What is your goal for your career?
I want to be NBA player.
And because of where he came from, he felt like he owed Milwaukee something. They took a chance on him, and so he had to prove that they were right. And so he worked, he bulked up, he turned into what is essentially the European version of Mamba mentality in the Milwaukee snow. For a while, Milwaukee was matching that same energy. They weren't just sitting on a once-in-a-generation player, they started making real moves to build around him. And so we got to 2021. Giannis is at his peak up to that point, and the Bucks were finally going for it, in a championship that made it look like this partnership was symbiotic and might really last forever. But that's where the downfall really started. Because once you understand how perfect that championship moment was, you can see just how far everything has slipped since. The Milwaukee Bucks built an amazing contender that ended up taking it all the way in 2021. Aside from the excuses people may make, like Kyrie's injuries or KD's shoe size, they managed to create a team that could make it to the finals and also win when there. Near the trade deadline of 2020, the Bucks moved Bledsoe and George Hill, plus 3 first-round picks for Middleton and Jrue Holiday. With Giannis already being a relatively proven player, the hope was to target the weak points of the team in order to complement him, and that's exactly what happened. Middleton helped space the floor with perimeter shooting, making it so that every play wasn't going through the paint. Meanwhile, Jrue Holiday raised the defensive floor of the team, getting steals and other small defensive moves, while Giannis and the Bigs could focus on blocks and rebounds. The team was the highest defensive team in the league and at the top of the standings, proving that this core had everything it needed to win. Even when we look at it from just an anecdotal standpoint, Giannis was injured for a few key games for the 2021 playoffs, and the team was still able to make it. And the defense ended up winning the championship, not just from the Giannis block that everyone remembers, but from the whole team, because just as iconic as the Giannis block was this moment.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, and Antetokounmpo throws it down. And a foul. Giannis on the alley-oop. What a turnaround. Gets into the picture, comes up with the strip. Turning the basketball over and then off to the races. Could have held it out, instead made the right read. Throws it up where only Giannis can catch it. Finishes it with the contact.
The biggest problem, though, is that a championship like this cost money. Giannis loved the way the year ended with confetti around him, and he responded by signing the 5-year, $228 million Supermax, the biggest contract in NBA history at that point. Chris Middleton was also already on a 5-year, $178 million that he signed in 2019. Jrue Holiday got his 4-year extension that could have climbed up to around $160 million. Brook Lopez was also locked in for about a 4-year deal of about $13 million a year. So if you zoom out, by the time that they're even having the parade, Milwaukee has basically tied up well over $500 million in their top 3 guys alone, plus Brook Lopez in the back. There's a small market tax. If you're going to keep a generational player, you have to pay everyone. But that's also where the slow bleed of the team begins to start. The warning signs actually showed up before the championship. In 2019, the Bucks let Malcolm Brogdon walk in a sign-in trade to Indiana instead of just paying him. He was a former Rookie of the Year with 50, 40, 90 season. He fit perfectly next to Giannis, and they traded him for picks and tax flexibility. You can spin it how you want, but the message becomes pretty simple. It's, we'll spend a lot, but not that a lot. And the trend continued. After winning the ring, they did the same exact thing with PJ Tucker. From a pure box score standpoint, it is a logical move. He's a 35-year-old aging vet who isn't really putting up any crazy numbers. But that's until you look at the eye test and he's doing stuff like this. As cliche or cringy as it sounds to say, PJ Tucker was really a hustle player for this team, even in his 35-year-old status. In fact, there's even a Bucks article that ranks not re-signing PJ Tucker as the 12th biggest mistake the franchise has made since 2002. Their three biggest points in the article were he was the missing piece for the 2021 run by defending Durant on every possession, bringing the toughness and hustle that I mentioned, and giving you just enough spacing for corner threes. His ask in free agency was a reasonable 2-year deal, and Miami ended up getting him for roughly $15 million over 2 years, while Milwaukee instead got guys like Rodney Hood and Grayson Allen, players who might have had shooting or brought bench depth, but not the same defensive edge or playoff experience as that veteran player. Officially, John Hurst pointed to the luxury tax and how expensive it would have been to keep him, and he was technically correct. The tax bill would have jumped. But from a basketball perspective, especially coming off of a championship, it looked a lot more like penny pinching versus trying to keep a lasting dynasty. You can see that impact right away in 2022. Middleton's injury is the headline reason that they lost to Boston, but the ripple effect of no PJ Tucker was there too, and they ended up not going to the semis. Grayson Allen brought the offense, but he became a clear target for people like Tatum and Brown on defense, and Game 7 turns into Grant Williams getting wide open looks because the Bucks are selling out on the stars and there's no veteran glue guy on the floor to plug that leak or in the locker room to call it out, which is exactly what PJ Tucker would have done. Meanwhile, Tucker is in Miami. He shoots a career best percentage from 3 and helps the Heat reach the Eastern Conference Finals. So when you stack it all together, before you even get to the Dame trade or all the coaching moves, you already have a pattern forming. You paid the top of your core big money, which makes sense since that's what every team does, but then you started cutting cost around the edges in order to make money for it, with guys like Malcolm Brogdon and Tucker, who were actually perfect fits next to Giannis. And that's just some role players. Now imagine if instead they traded, maybe the second best defensive player on the team behind Giannis? And that's where we get to the Jrue Holiday trade. Jrue wasn't just another good guard. On that 2021 run, he was basically what held everything together, especially on defense. You can see it in the playoff on-off numbers. The Bucks were about plus 15 per 100 possessions better when Jrue was on the floor compared to when he was off the floor. That's the highest swing on that team. It doesn't mean that he was better than Giannis, but it does show how much of a structure depended on Jrue being out there on defense. He's the guy taking the toughest perimeter matchup, the guy you can trust to bring the ball up so Giannis doesn't have to dribble through 3 defenders to start a play, and he's the one fighting over every screen so that Brooks' drop coverage actually works. So when Milwaukee then traded him away in the Dame trade, it wasn't a simple all-star for all-star trade. They were trading the second best defender on the roster, the point of attack guy that makes the whole defensive scheme functional, and all for a mid-30s guard whose game is almost entirely on the offensive side rather than defense, and is already on a supermax that already gets more expensive as he ages, after you already were cutting cost because of Giannis's supermax. The problem is that this trade moved all of Milwaukee's chips onto the offensive side of the table and away from the defensive identity that had just won them the ring. If you dig up my podcast from right after the deal, I was already stating this. You're swapping your best perimeter defender for a pure scorer and hoping that the math worked out. What makes it even worse is that the Bucks just beat a team built on that exact formula. The Nets were first in offense and 22nd in defense, and it all fell apart. I can go deeper into that for another video, but rather than focusing on the Nets, let's focus on what's important. The blueprint for this mistake was already there, and Milwaukee had just beat them, and yet they decided to copy them. Then we get into Middleton. At his peak, Chris is already exactly what you want next to Giannis. Someone who can hit the tough shots, bail you out late in the clock, and give you a secondary creator so it's not just Giannis on every possession. The problem is what his career looks like right after the title. Chris Middleton kept getting injured, and his availability was always questionable, and he didn't quite move the same way that he did back in the 2021 championship. Despite that, the Bucks doubled down with a new 3-year deal worth over $100 million that ran into his mid-30s. So now, if you look at the money, you have Giannis on a supermax, Dame on a supermax that gets more expensive every year, and Middleton also getting a massive contract but with declining availability. Individually, you can kind of justify each contract. You had Chris Middleton, who helped win you a ring. You now have Damian Lillard, and of course Giannis. But once you put it all together, the pattern is pretty clear. You had already again saved money with people like Brogdon and Tucker, and now you've given all that money away into co-stars whose healthiest and most reliable seasons are already in the past. Because on top of that, the guy that you brought in to the offensive upgrade while leaving all of your defense, as we already discussed, wasn't some 25-year-old guard that can stay on the team. Damian Lillard was already on the wrong side of 30, athletically speaking, when the trade happened. He already had some miles on him, and he already had some low body issues. So the Bucks were already taking a massive gamble about whether he stayed healthy and if the offense would outweigh the defensive loss. So the second that Dame started missing chunks of time, or he clearly wasn't moving like the way he did in Portland, it immediately stops being a blockbuster trade, and instead of being an A-, it starts to be a C at best, if not a D or an F level trade. If we really dive into the numbers, you can see exactly how the load shifted onto Giannis once all these moves started stacking up. The exact defense to offense gamble failed exactly as predicted. In 2020 to 2021, the championship year, the Bucks are 5th in offense and 9th in defense. By 2023 to 24, the first year with Dame and no Jrue, that becomes 6th on offense and 19th in defense, meaning that they actually dropped the place on offense and tanked on defense. In 2024 to 25, they slide again to 10th on offense and 12th on defense. Of course, injuries factor in, but that almost proves my point. If your efficiency falls off a cliff every time Dame or Giannis isn't available, that means you've traded so much of your depth and you've balanced for a very top-heavy team. The 2021 team had some margin for error. This team does not. You see the same pattern when Giannis doesn't play at all. In 2020 to 2021, the Bucks went 6-5 without him. In 2023 to 24, they go 4-5. This season, they're 1-7. So year over year, they're becoming less like a contender that can survive a few games without its star, and more like a team that drops to the bottom of standings the moment that he's off the court. The on-off numbers show exactly that. In 2020 to 2021, with Giannis on the floor, they're about 117.1 offensive rating and 112.4 for around a 4.7 net. When he's off the court, it goes to around 107.3 on offense and 110.7 on defense, for around a negative 3.4 net rating. That's around an 8-point difference for on-court, off-court net rating. It's a decent change, but it's normal for a team that has a superstar. By 2023 to 24, that gap gets wider. When Giannis is on the court, they have a roughly 11 net rating. Whenever he's off the court, they basically have 0 net rating. This year, it's the same idea. With him on the court, they're firmly in positive net territory. With him off, you're hovering around 0 net rating once again, or even worse. So every minute that Giannis is on the floor, once again, you look like a contender for at least the Eastern Conference. Every minute that he's off, you struggle to score as many points as you're giving up. If we throw player efficiency rating into the mix, it shows the same thing from a different angle. In 2021, Giannis has a 27.6 player efficiency rating. Second place on the team is around a 22.7 player efficiency rating. That's what you expect on a championship level. You have a clear number one, but a real high level help behind him, and the drop off becomes more gradual. In 2024 to 2025, Giannis is at 33.2 player efficiency rating, with the second best Buck being all the way down at 19.7. If we go back to 2021, even when you drop out of the top 5 to 7th place in player efficiency rating, you have Jrue Holiday with 15.2. While in 2024 to 2025, third place is already below that with 13.7. And if we go to the same 7th place that Jrue Holiday with 15.2 was once at, Brook Lopez doesn't even break double digits at 8.8. And you just continue to get lower from there, with people in the negatives for player efficiency rating. With the way player efficiency is calculated, that means they get more negative plays like turnovers or fouls over points, steals, and rebounds, meaning that mathematically, Giannis is literally playing with players on the team who hurt the team by getting minutes. These numbers show just how far the Bucks have shifted from a semi-deep roster where everyone had a job to a team that falls apart the second their stars sit. And that's before we even mention players like Kyle Kuzma, the guy that was brought in after trading Middleton and has a negative 5.8 net rating when he's on the floor and a 18.3 whenever he's off the floor, meaning that it's a 24-point swing better whenever Kyle Kuzma is not playing. On paper, it's basically saying that the team gets worse every time he gets minutes. At this point, it almost looks like the Bucks are trying to set themselves up to lose, like emulating a 76ers process, except for the fact that the Bucks don't even have another first-round pick until 2030 or a second-round pick until 2033, meaning that even if they did do this, it wouldn't work. And that loops all the way back to the beginning line that I opened the video with. I want to be a Milwaukee Buck for the rest of my career, as long as we are winning. The problem is that they're clearly not winning at the level that that quote implies anymore. They're losing to teams like the Wizards, one of the worst records in the league, in a game that basically relit the fuse on why this whole trade cycle talk has been hanging over the Bucks the last few years. At this point, not only are they wasting Giannis's prime, but the amount of responsibility that he has is also going to wear him down faster and harder until he's unrecognizable from the player that he was on the championship roster, as evident by how frequently he's injured now. And even with all these problems, maybe, just maybe, even with a roster this bad, you could still make something work if you had a great coach. Someone who knew how to lean into everybody's strengths, hide their weaknesses, and make every cog in the machine spin at maximum efficiency. And who do the Bucks have as a coach? Doc fucking Rivers. After the 2023 first-round loss, the Bucks move on from Mike Budenholzer, the same coach who helped build the system that got them the first seeds in the championship in the first place. They replaced him with Adrian Griffin, and then they fired him mid-season while he's sitting around 30-13, proving the amount of panic that they've been in, firing him even with a winning record. Then they hand the team to Doc Rivers, and nothing screams this will stabilize things like hiring him. People were actively making fun of it the moment that it happened.
Doc Rivers has never taken an L in his life, I don't think, bro. My man, he'll take an L and it's a dub somehow, bro.
He learned from the best.
Yo, he finessed his way into the Bucks organization. Like,
that's still so funny to me.
That's crazy.
When they called Doc to be a consultant, I don't even think Doc did nothing dirty. Right? That's like, come on, man. It's not like he was retired. Like, if you call a retired coach to be, because
he was 41-41, which is the worst percentage any coach of the year. You are 50% and you won coach of the year. How is this man getting? Who is this man? Who does he know?
And then to add the cherry on top, you also have Darvin Ham, who is just as laughable. The defense doesn't suddenly snap back to what it was in 2021, the bad habits don't magically disappear, and the record doesn't show some huge coaching bump. To be honest, I don't know what they expected bringing in a coach whose reputation is built more on blown leads and underachieving rosters than overperforming ones. I've already gone into all that in my Doc Rivers hater manifesto, so I won't rerun the whole rant here, but it fits the same mentality of this video. Instead of giving Giannis a clear, steady foundation, the Bucks keep taking short-sighted swings and hoping that he's good enough to cover the entire team. And this is something I've already talked about in other videos as well, that constant changes of coaches is one of the worst things you can do for a team. Every coach has a different system, different expectations, different languages, and a different playbook. So when your solution every year is to hire a new guys to handle the roster, you're not fixing the problem. You're instead yanking the players in 3 or 4 different directions, which doesn't give them one clear identity. And it makes them have to juggle conflicting habits and game plans from a revolving door of coaches. And at a certain point, that starts to become less of a basketball issue and more of a mental one. Your players will start second guessing, overthinking, and trying to remember which version of the playbook they're supposed to be running that season. And all of that is currently happening on the Bucks while Giannis is trying to win. So now, even with me ranting for a while here, it may be instinctive by now to wait until actual trade news comes out before being worried. As I said at the start of this video, trade rumors like this have been going around since 2019. Even if you go back to 2020 before the championship, the Bucks had just been wiped out in the bubble and people were already posting jersey swaps every day. But what actually happened? Giannis sits down with his family, his agent, and the front office, and instead of forcing his way out, he signs a 5-year, $228 million Supermax, the biggest contract in NBA history, as I mentioned. Then a year later, he wins the championship. So the first "he's gone" rumors ends in the exact opposite. And he doubles down, stays in Milwaukee long term, and proves everyone wrong on the court. However, we fast forward to now, and we start to get some verbiage about him leaving again, which sparked the trade rumors, saying, quote, "I don't want to be 20 years on the same team and not win another championship." He continues saying, "I'm a Milwaukee Buck, but more importantly, I'm a winner. If there's a better situation for me to win the Larry O'Brien, I have to take that better position." That's the first time Giannis openly puts winning above his loyalty to Milwaukee. It's no longer "I'm here no matter what," it's "I'm here if we're gonna keep winning." He still gives the Bucks a lifeline by signing a 3-year, $186 million extension but he has a player option at the end. And that is the important part of all of this. Before, he had a Supermax, but with this new contract, he gives himself an out. So, things are different. Giannis is older, with real mileage, and is starting to get some injuries. The roster around him is even older, getting more expensive, and is becoming hard to fix. The Bucks picks are basically tied up for the next few years, and most importantly, his contract finally gives him some real leverage if he wants to use it. And that answers the question many of you may have as to why this is getting more attention. How do we go from silly jersey swap photoshops to ESPN ranking trade packages for him? Well, this time, he's got an agent who is sitting down with him to discuss his future. Before, the noise was mostly external. Fans and media threw his name around to fill in engagement, and he killed the story by signing the long-term deals. But now, the pressure is internal and external. The numbers say that he's been carrying forever, and the eye test says that the roster isn't close to the championship anymore. The contract structure gives him an exit. And in his own quotes, he has already laid the groundwork that winning comes first. So with all that, I personally think that it's best for both Giannis and Milwaukee to step away. He gets what he wants by stepping away and joining a team that has more offers to win, and the Bucks potentially get some picks to start rebuilding their roster. Where he goes next and who can actually give him a real offer is a whole separate conversation. And I break that down with CJ on the podcast, grading which teams make the most sense. I'll have that linked down in the description and in the pinned comment if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But if you made it this far to the end of the video, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this, where I try to dive deep and actually dig into the numbers behind the story. And if you know someone who'd be interested in this type of content as well, please send it to them, as it really does help out the channel. But with all that said, this is the video that YouTube thinks that you'll like watching next, so be sure to check that out. And in the meantime, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.